Hey everyone, we're talking about random variables and probability functions today. We're going to get into expected value as well as finding standard deviations. So first off, what's a random variable? So it's a numeric quantity that changes from trial to trial in a random process. So a few examples are shown here. And generally we use a capital letter like X or Y to denote that we're using a random variable. So we could be talking about the number of wins in the World Series, the sum of two dice, the grade on the next statistics exam, the time to run 1 mile, or maybe the weight of this cute little rat eating a wedge of cheese. Random variables come in two different categories, either discrete or continuous. Discrete has a finite number of possibilities, so the sum of two dice, we can't actually get a decimal there. But if you're talking about continuous variables, that's when you're actually going to have multiple values within some interval. So you can have 3.4 or 2.5, because that weight of the rat is probably not in whole pounds. It's important to distinguish between discrete and continuous because it determines the way that we're going to be able to find the probabilities. If we have continuous data, we're going to be using a density curve, and we're not going to talk about those until Chapter 5. Today, we're only going to be talking about discrete random variables. The mean of a random variable is also known as the expected value, and it's a little bit different than the computation we've done in the past. What we're going to do is we're going to take the value, multiply by the probability, and then add all of those together. So let's take a look at this example of the scores of an AP statistics exam. You have X values of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Those are the scores that you can receive, and the probabilities underneath them, 23%, 18%, 24%, 22%, and 13%. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the X value, multiply by the probability of each one, and then sum them all together to get the expected value of 2.84. So here's another example about playing the lottery. So here's a chart describing the mean winnings for one ticket. So if I want to know the expected value by putting in $1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the value, multiply by the probability for every dollar amount, and then I'm going to sum those together. And I get 0.593. Which means that I'm going to lose about 40 cents for every dollar ticket that I buy. The variance and standard deviation are also important values when we're talking about a probability function. Sigma squared is the variance, and the way that's calculated is you take your value of X, subtract the mean from it, and square it. That's going to give you a positive value, and then you're going to multiply that by the probability. You're going to do that in every single case, and then you're going to sum them together. That gives you the variance. To find the standard deviation, we need to take the square root of the variance. It's quite different than the standard deviation we've calculated in the past by plugging it into our TI-84 calculators. You're going to need to do this formula to find the standard deviation for probability functions. Now let's compute the standard deviation from the example that we were just looking at. We already know that the mean is 2.84. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our X value and we're going to subtract the mean from it, square it, and then multiply that by the probability. Here are the first two scores that we're talking about. We're going to continue this process for 3, 4, and 5. That gives us R squared of 1.8144. But remember, that's the variance. We want the standard deviation, or sigma. So what we need to do is we need to take the square root of that to get 1.347. That's our standard deviation in this case. So here's a summary. A random variable is a numerical outcome from a random process. The probability function gives the probabilities for the possible values of a discrete random variable. And remember, those probabilities need to add to 1. Also, the mean for a discrete random variable is found by taking your X value, multiplying by the probability in each situation, and adding those together. The standard deviation is a little more complicated. We take the mean, and we take our X and subtract the mean, then square it, then multiply by the probability value, add those all together, and finally take the square root to find sigma, or our standard deviation.